Our story begins in a place most children would recognize today as home. Ah, yes, London. Back then, though, Londoners didn't have the luxury of knowing their way around the city. See, in the 1800s, London was booming. New businesses meant new jobs, and families flocked there for a better life. But supply couldn't keep up with demand. So while people did find work, they also found terrible housing conditions. Families crammed into tiny rooms. They shared these rooms with rats, insects, and waste. And as we said before, there often wasn't even a room for everyone. Children slept in the streets, on grates, under bridges. Sometimes families had to resort to sleeping in shifts so that someone could watch the meager belongings they owned. Their bed rolled up on the street corner, a blanket, maybe an old, tattered suitcase. It's late in the evening now. A chill wind whips through the crooked alleys. Above you, the laundry flaps listlessly on a narrow line between buildings. Below you, a puddle reflects the flickering glow of a nearby gas lamp. What do you hear? The steady clip-clop of a horse's shoes on cobblestones. Maybe the rattle of a cart laden with who knows what. And above it all, the rumble of the city, the murmur of 1,000 stories unfolding in the darkness. In this moment, you realize you are just one of many ghosts haunting these streets. For a visitor in 1851, this is what London sounded like, smelled like, felt like. We need to talk about the smells of the Industrial Revolution. Don't get me wrong, there were plenty of bad smells in pre-industrial England, but the Industrial Revolution brought an unprecedented amount of stink. Coal smoke filled the air, turning the sky a perpetual gray. Rivers ran black with industrial waste. The stench of stale waste mixed with the reek of animal skins being processed, the sour smell of vinegar. Factories, the cloying sweetness of sugar refineries, all of these smells combined to form a thick, heavy smog that hung over the cities. Some people grew up believing the sky was just that color. Of course, it didn't help that most people couldn't afford soap. And that led to another unfortunate byproduct of the industrial age, body odor. People simply couldn't wash themselves or their clothes very often, which meant that the average person smelled like, well, you can imagine. In fact, during the Industrial Revolution, the poor got poorer, the rich got richer, and everyone got smellier. It was a time of great disparity, but we can't talk about that right now. Not yet. You're too close to the laundry line. A woman hangs a fresh shirt on the line. Her husband works in the coal mines. Can you smell the grime on him? The sweat, the dust, the danger? You wonder how long his shirt will stay fresh before it takes on the stench of his trade once more. This is just one of the sights you might see on your stroll through London tonight. So let's move on. Let's head deeper into the heart of London. Your destination, Whitechapel, notorious for its poverty and crime. You wander down a narrow alley, its brick walls damp and stained. Gaslights illuminate swirling dust particles and dancing shadows. As you round a corner, you see a huddled figure, half hidden in the gloom. Is it a beggar, a thief, or something worse? Your breath catches in your throat as you inch closer. Slowly, the shape emerges from the shadows. A woman, haggard and gaunt, eyes hollow, clutching a tattered shawl about her shoulders. She looks up as you pass, a silent plea in her gaze. You offer a coin, a small respite in her sea of troubles. Turning away, you shake off a sudden chill, unease settling in your bones. You quicken your pace, eager to escape the oppressive gloom of Whitechapel. By now, you've heard the whispers, the rumors spreading like disease through the crowded streets of London. A shadowy figure stalking the night, striking terror into the hearts of the unsuspecting. Jack the Ripper. Ah, but you're not here to meet him. No, you are merely a ghost, a silent observer drifting through the shadows of Victorian England. Your journey almost done. Soon you will leave this world of grime and gaslight behind. But before you vanish completely, One final image seared into your mind, a stark reminder of the darkness that lingers even in the fading light. You stand before a building stark and imposing against the twilight sky, its windows like vacant eyes staring into the abyss. This is the London Hospital, Whitechapel. Within these four walls, a story unfolds, not of love or hope, but of fear and death. For here it was that the victims of Jack the Ripper sought refuge, their lives ebbing away on cold, hard beds, their stories lost to the fog and shadows of London's underbelly. You clutch your throat, the echo of their cries reverberating through your very being. Your time has come to an end. You fade away, leaving the nightmare of Jack the Ripper behind. But the echoes of this haunting tale linger still in the cobblestone streets and fog-laden alleys of London town. And as you drift into the velvety darkness, you know this story won't soon be forgotten. I want to tell you about a world without rights, a world where children work 14-hour days, where they get paid by the piece, and the overseers watch them like hawks, where life expectancy is 38 years and poverty is the norm. A world without hope, really. A world without childhood. Welcome to Victorian London. Imagine waking before the sun. You're 8 years old. Your mattress is a flattened pile of old rags shared with 2 or 3 siblings. The air is cold, and your breath curls in the dim light like a ghost. There's no fireplace, no fresh bread. Only the sound of your mother coughing in the next room, a wet, rasping sound that hasn't gone away in months. The room itself is hardly more than a closet. Walls are damp to the touch, the plaster flaking into the food, if there's any. In summer, the stench from the communal privy outside wafts through the window. In winter, the cold creeps through the cracks. On the worst nights, you can see your breath even under a pile of coarse blankets. If you're lucky, you sleep. If not, you scratch your skin raw. The lice are always there. Slum housing in places like Whitechapel or Southwark meant 10, sometimes 20 people in a single building, sharing one privy and one water pump. Many were back-to-backs, narrow buildings with no rear windows, crammed together so tightly that sunlight barely touched the street. Children, especially, bore the weight of poverty's silence. By age 6 or 7, many were already working. In factories, textile mills, matchstick workshops, or as chimney sweeps. Their small bodies were suited for narrow spaces. Let's linger in one such match factory for a moment. It's still dark outside. The factory bell rings. A harsh, metallic clang, and you hurry in. Rows of benches, jars of phosphorus paste, and trays of matchsticks stretch before you. You dip and roll, dip and roll. The paste stains your fingers and slowly eats at your jawbone. Something called phossy jaw. The other girls joke about it in whispers. When one vanishes, the rest don't ask questions. The day is long, 14 hours. Sometimes 18. You're paid by the piece. If you slow down, the overseer notices. He doesn't shout, not always. Sometimes it's worse than that. Just a look. Just the deduction from your pay. You may be wondering why this sounds so familiar. Well, maybe it's those images of the matchstick girls from your art class, or the paintings of starving Irish children in the slums, or the stories your grandmother told you about working at the textile mill in Manchester until her hands were like, "I never want to hold another spool of thread again," or the time she saw a group of destitute people huddled around a grate in London and thought, "I could have been one of those." Because this was the world that gave rise to the greatest social novel ever written. When Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist, he based him on real children, children like Thomas, who when he was 6 years old had to leave school because his family needed the money. His father had been sent to prison for debt, and his mother died when he was very young. He spent his days sweeping chimneys, enduring abuse, and inhaling toxic waste that eventually killed him at the age of 20. Or Lizzie, who was born in poverty and died in poverty. She worked as a matchstick girl from the age of 7 and had to live with the constant fear of being replaced. She married young and had children of her own, but couldn't escape the cycle of poverty. She died at 39, having lived her entire life in the shadow of a world that offered her no opportunities. These stories are not relics of the past. They are a warning for the future. For every child who goes hungry today, for every child who is denied education, for every child who works long, and dangerous hours, for every child who is exploited and abused, for every child who has their rights violated, remember the children of Victorian London. And ask yourself, what are we doing to ensure that their story ends with them? Because let me tell you this, if you think this story is over, you'd be wrong. The echoes of these matchstick girls and chimney sweeps still resonate today. Theirs is a story that continues to unfold in the lives of millions of children worldwide, who wake up every morning not knowing if they will ever see their childhood again. Their story is our story. And until we do something about it, their nightmare becomes our collective shame. Thank you for watching this video. The air in London is thick with the smell of chimney, soot, and stale waste. Above, the sky has been aching for years with the smoke from countless factories and homes burning cheap fuels. But look closer at the smoke. See how it dances and swirls, obscuring the sun and moon in equal measure. In this gray gloom, good and evil seem to meet and mingle. London in the late 19th century is a battleground, not just for Jack the Ripper's victims, but for all who inhabit its teeming streets. And no one is safe. Life in the slums was not just grim, it was grinding. You work long hours, if you're lucky, to earn a wage that barely covers rent and food. And even then, there's no rest when you return home. Maybe you have to fetch water. Maybe your baby brother needs minding while your mother goes to scrub laundry. Evenings in the slum are not filled with laughter. They're filled with coughing, with leaking ceilings, with the soft scurry of rats. Always rats. You learn not to scream when one runs across your foot. Disease is everywhere, though the newspapers often use gentler words. Miasma, they'll say, hangs in the air. Cholera, typhoid, diphtheria. They spread faster in these neighborhoods than the ink can print death notices. And still, life goes on. Children like you, thin, underfed, shivering in the damp play with bits of string and broken glass. They scavenge coal dropped by carts. They race down alleys and get back up when they fall. Because in the slums, childhood doesn't mean innocence. It means survival. Even the schools, where they exist, are no escape. Ragged schools, so called because of the state of their pupils, offer rudimentary lessons, often with corporal punishment attached. Teachers are overworked, supplies are short, and the hunger never leaves your belly long enough to focus on the alphabet. And yet, in this world of soot and sorrow, there is also resilience, small joys. A mother humming softly while folding laundry, a bit of bread shared between siblings, the sight of a lamplighter at dusk sparking tiny flames along the street. Each little moment, a thread in the heavy tapestry of daily life. By night, the slums grow quiet, but never still. Somewhere, a baby cries. Somewhere, a drunk sings off-key. Somewhere, in the dark, another child dreams or perhaps just waits for morning. Now, picture this. Your family home is in Whitechapel. All around you, the people you know, love and fear gather in the close, dark corners of the East End. Here, the cobbles are slick with waste, and the air bites hard with cold. Every face here seems carved with worry. Every cough echoes a harsh truth. Life is cheap here. So is death. As we step out of the slums and into the shadows of London's more infamous horrors, keep this backdrop in mind. The poverty, the fear, the press of bodies, it all mattered. It shaped what came next. For in Whitechapel, in the year 1888, something darker took root in the fog. There is so much to uncover about Jack the Ripper's victims. Their killer, if he ever truly had one, the motives behind the crimes, the case itself. But before we dive into those murky waters, take a moment to consider the world they inhabited. If you were living in London at the time, how might your story have intersected with Jack the Ripper's? What would you have seen, heard, smelled? What fears might have gnawed at you as you went about your daily life? Perhaps most importantly, how might this backdrop of poverty, disease, and despair have influenced the course of events? Did the darkness of London help give rise to Jack the Ripper, or was he a figment born of an already troubled time? This is a story within a story, one that deserves to be told not just for the sake of the victims, but for the multitude of others whose lives Jack the Ripper's crimes both mirrored and marred. Now, my friends, let us begin our descent into the abyss. Our first stop, the unsettling familiarity of everyday life in Victorian London's East End. What do you notice about the way the author describes the environment? How does this setting contribute to the overall tone and themes of the passage? Let's discuss in the comments. Also, please subscribe for more updates on this channel. Whitechapel, London. The year is 1888. The streets are a tangle of narrow passages, horse droppings, soot, and whispers. And above it all, fog, thick, low, stubborn. A fog that clings to everything, to your coat, to your breath, to your very thoughts. It's the kind of fog that makes you wonder what's real and what isn't. This is the setting in which the name Jack the Ripper first surfaced, not in the mouths of police, but in a letter, possibly a hoax, certainly cruel. The fear, however, was real. But let's not rush toward the violence. Let's walk slowly through the streets the victims once walked. You see, they were women, often impoverished, sometimes unhoused, sometimes making do through means frowned upon by Victorian society. Many lived in lodging houses, single rooms paid for night by night. If they didn't have 4 pence, they didn't have a roof. So they walked, late at night, often alone, not because they wanted to, but because they had no other choice. The cold air bit, the fog swirled, and yet survival demanded motion, step after step. The Ripper's crimes, brutal and cold, occurred in a neighborhood already aching with hardship. There was no need to create horror. It was already there, baked into the walls and cobbles. Police struggled. Investigations were primitive by today's standards. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no cameras, just tired constables with oil lamps and notepads, trying to make sense of scenes that made no sense at all. Each murder left fewer answers and more dread. Newspapers printed sketches. Rumors spread faster than facts. And always the fog returned. At night, parents whispered warnings. Lodging house keepers barred their doors more quickly. But poverty doesn't pause for danger. The streets still filled with the desperate and the weary, the people no one noticed until they were gone. I'm the author of a book about the Jack the Ripper murders. Now, when we think of Jack the Ripper, we naturally think of violence. Of a killer stalking the gaslit streets of London's East End, hacking his victims to pieces with a knife. But those things didn't make Whitechapel dangerous. That was already dangerous enough, without the threat of a murder lurking around every corner. The fog, the poverty, the isolation, the desperation, the lack of opportunity, the casual cruelty, the uncaring, all of that made Whitechapel dangerous. To be poor in Victorian London was to live in a world of its own, hidden away in the poorest districts of the East End, where whole communities of the destitute lived out their lives in the shadows, unseen, unheard, forgotten by the rest of society. In Whitechapel, poverty was inescapable. The constant threat of destitution hung over everyone like a dark cloud. People lived hand to mouth, day to day, week to week, never knowing when they might find themselves out of work and without a penny to their name. They were trapped in a cycle of deprivation that seemed to have no end. And it was this, more than anything else, that made Whitechapel such a hard place to live in. For example, there were entire communities of so-called professional beggars who had no choice but to beg on the streets for money to survive. Then there were the casuals, people who worked sporadically in whatever jobs they could find, but who had no steady income or reliable housing. There were also the tramp women or casual women who turned to prostitution as a means of survival. All of these groups of people were seen as a nuisance, an annoyance by the middle-class Victorians who lived in the wealthier parts of London. They were the dregs of society, the people who were considered to be beyond the pale. They were invisible, their voices unheard, their stories untold. If you want to know what it was like to be poor in Victorian London, then you need to come to Whitechapel. You need to wander through the crowded, filthy streets, past the overflowing garbage cans and the piles of rotting fruit and vegetables past the groups of ragged, hungry children, past the people who sleep rough on the sidewalks, past the dimly lit pubs where the men go to drink away their sorrows. Only then can you begin to understand what it was like to be poor in Victorian London. So what was life like for the poor in Whitechapel? Well, it was a life of hardship and struggle, a life of destitution and despair, a life of misery and neglect. Thank you. There are many ways to describe London in 1888: imperial, industrial, inventive, imposing. But sanitary, that was not one of them. Consider this. In a city of about 6 million people, there were around 150,000 privy vaults, aka public bathrooms, and each handled the business of around 2,000 people. The Thames, normally at least, carried off London's other waste. But in 1888, thanks to an unusually hot summer, the river ran low, sluggish, and putrid. And so Londoners got a double dose of their own effluent, both in the air and on the ground. By August, the stench had become unbearable. People gagged stepping out of their homes. Businessmen fled to the countryside. Members of Parliament literally passed out in the House of Commons. So bad was the smell that Queen Victoria herself remarked upon it. And that was just in the palace, far from the source. That source was here, in the East End, specifically in and around Whitechapel, the neighborhood most associated with Jack the Ripper. For those unfamiliar with the area, let me paint a picture. Imagine yourself in one of these alleyways. It's quiet, comfortably so. A distant cart rumbles. A dog barks once, then falls silent. You glance down, your boots slick from the muddy gutter, and pull your coat tighter. There is no one here, and yet you feel eyes on you. The cobblestones seem to press closer, the buildings lean in, the gaslight flickers, casting elongated shadows that writhe like phantoms. Your pace quickens, your breath catches in your throat. There is no one here, but something lingers in the silence. Something wicked, perhaps, or maybe just the night itself. You reach the end of the alley, emerging blinking into the dim glow of the main street. Sighing, you push on, relieved to be out of that shadowy place. But the relief doesn't last. Everywhere you turn, more darkness, more alleys, more lurking shapes and shadows. And always the silence, thick and heavy as the fog that rolls in after dark. It was this feeling, not the crimes themselves, but the tension in the silence that defined those weeks. In the end, Jack the Ripper was never caught. The list of suspects was long and speculative. Some blamed butchers, others madmen. A few even whispered of aristocrats or secret societies. No answer satisfied the public, and none ever would. The case became legend not because of its resolution, or lack thereof, but because it asked questions that remain unanswered to this day. Why those women? Why this neighborhood? And who, exactly, wrote that chilling letter with its mocking tone and final flourish? Yours truly, Jack the Ripper? We don't know. We may never know. But here is something often forgotten. After the murders stopped, the fog didn't lift. The poverty didn't vanish. The fear didn't dissolve. Life in Whitechapel trudged onward, slowly, painfully, stubbornly. The residents still woke to coughing, to hunger, to overcrowded rooms. And the women, though afraid, still walked the streets when they had to. Because in the end, even terror can become part of the routine. But in 1888, there was another overriding sensation in Whitechapel and many parts of London: disgust. To be fair, the good people of London had plenty to be disgusted by. Horse dung in the streets, spoiled food in the markets, the constant threat of cholera and typhoid, and yes, the stench of the Thames, which reached such a fever pitch in August that the Times of London called it a disgrace to the age and country. Adding to the general grime was the fact that for decades, London had lacked a proper sewage system. The River Fleet, which ran through Whitechapel, was little more than an open sewer. As for the buildings, well, here's a Victorian house for you. Notice anything? No plumbing, indoor or out. The residents of Whitechapel solved that problem the old-fashioned way, in the same way they solved most problems, by making do. They hung out their chamber pots, you know, the buckets you used instead of indoor toilets, out their windows. Then at night, they emptied them into the streets below. So when I say that Jack the Ripper worked in a particularly disgusting environment, I'm not exaggerating. In fact, it was probably more unpleasant here than in most places, given that the killer or killers operated with impunity and were never caught. There was no sense of safety, no belief that the foulness of the streets or the desperation of the people could be improved. After all, how could they when the very heart of London stank so? It was a problem that ultimately required a massive and expensive solution: new and improved sewage systems, better housing codes, and a series of unfortunate accidents that killed off tens of thousands of rats. Those last two happened simultaneously in the 19th century when Londoners began dumping their sewage into the newly opened up sewer system instead of the river. Turns out rats prefer to live in tunnels. Who knew? That might be a story for another time. For now, let us return to 1888 and the summer the River Thames turned against London. Stay tuned for more stories from history's most notorious neighborhoods. By 1865, the first line was complete. By 1875, 8 lines snaked beneath the heart of London. They remain there still. And today, more than ever, we appreciate them. Not just for keeping London sweet-smelling, but for keeping it alive. Because while the Victorians proudly declared their sewers a triumph of public health, they didn't quite finish the job. See, even as the muck was diverted from the Thames, Londoners still dumped all manner of things in it: oil and fat and plaster, even live cats and dogs. So the river remained, well, not exactly clean, but at least it wasn't a stinking open sewer anymore, and people kept using it. Well, they used to. For centuries, Londoners got water from the river, too, though increasingly they turned to wells and pumps. Still, the Thames provided most of the fish and shellfish consumed in London. Did they know it was a dumping ground? Perhaps they just didn't care. They ate the fish anyway. They bathed in the river, too. Oh, not the classiest habit, perhaps, but in the pre-modern world, running water was a luxury reserved for the very rich. Most people had no choice but to use the same water for drinking, washing, and yes, flushing. Public baths were rare and basic. Private homes had none. Water from the Thames was free. Some houses had private docks. Others sent children down to the river with pails and empty vessels. They would collect the water and bring it home. That went on until the 1840s, when cholera and other diseases started claiming thousands of lives every year. Then came the Public Health Act of 1848. It was a watershed moment. At last, cities had to provide clean water for their residents. And so London embarked on a massive project to build pumping stations and aqueducts and reservoirs. Many of those are still in use today, but the transition to cleaner water wasn't easy. There was resistance from people who worried about the cost or whose livelihoods depended on the old ways. It took decades for the new water supply to replace the Thames entirely. And yet, remarkably, people still used the river to wash themselves and their clothes. They laundered cloth and carpets in the Thames until the 1960s. And while swimming was officially banned in the river after 1928, that didn't stop determined Londoners from taking dips until the 1970s. As recently as the 1980s, the Thames was so polluted that fish rarely survived beyond their larval stage. Over the decades, various industries upstream had dumped toxins, detergents, even radioactive waste. But now strict laws and monitoring systems have made the river safer. Is it clean enough to swim in? Probably not yet. But here's the remarkable thing about rivers. Even when they stink and they're dirty, we can't stay away from them. The Romans knew it. They built their cities along riverbanks. We knew it. Ancient civilizations rose around the world. And today, 80% of us worldwide live within 100 kilometers of a river. Now they say the Thames is the lifeblood of London. For centuries, it was the artery through which the city grew, its trade routes and transport, even its very survival. Today, it faces new challenges: climate change, housing, development, pollution. But one thing hasn't changed: our love affair with the river. So far, we have been following the River Thames on its winding journey through London. We followed its path upstream, passing under bridges and around buildings until we arrived at the source of the Thames, or at least what was left of it. But now we want to follow the river in reverse, to travel downstream from its source to its mouth, where the Thames meets the sea. And to do that, we need to wind the clock back to the 19th century. This is the Industrial Revolution. London is choking on its own success. Its population has doubled in the space of just a few decades. Streets are jammed with people in horse-drawn carts. Businesses belch smoke into the air, and the river, the river is a soup of human waste, industrial runoff, and animal carcasses. It stinks, and something has to be done. Enter Joseph Bazalgette. He is the man with a plan to save London from itself, a plan to build the greatest sewer system the world has ever seen. It's dirty, dangerous work. And so the task falls to the lowest of the low, the prisoners. Convicted felons are given a choice: hard labor in the fields or hard labor with a pickaxe and shovel. Theirs is a sorry fate, a life of backbreaking work for a dubious reward. Most die within the first year, not from cholera or the other diseases that stalk the city, but from exhaustion. Those that survive are changed by the experience. Some emerge hollow-eyed and gaunt, others embittered and violent. But all of them carry the stink of the sewers within them, and none more so than Ruth, our protagonist from the previous episode. Ruth escapes before she goes blind, but the darkness that clings to her is deeper than any London fog. She wanders the city, lost and alone, haunted by the ghosts of her former life. Then she meets Harry. He is a different sort, an outsider like her, but unafraid. In fact, Harry is thrilled by the dark places of the city. He sees opportunity there, not just for himself, but for everyone. He wants to show Ruth that there is more to life than the grime and drudgery of the streets. And so he takes her with him on a grand adventure into the very heart of London as underbelly. Their destination, the sewers, those twisting, turning passages beneath the city, home to untold horrors and untold riches. They move through the tunnels like phantoms, dodging rats the size of terriers and stumbling upon things best left unseen. Through it all, Ruth is terrified, but also strangely exhilarated. Here, in this fetid underworld, she feels free. Theirs is a dangerous game, one that only Harry seems to understand. The rules of the sewers, how to navigate the tunnels, where to find food and water, above all, how to stay hidden. The sewer hunters are everywhere, those desperate souls willing to risk anything for a few stray shillings. Most of them are harmless, just looking for something to take back to the surface. But some are killers, murdering for a bit of pocket change or a fresh set of clothes. That's why Harry always carries a blade. He knows better than anyone that down here there is no law but the law of the knife. For a while, they live like this, two ghosts haunting the sewers. Then one day, everything changes. The city above them is in chaos. The stench of the river has become unbearable. Parliament is in crisis, and a group of eminent gentlemen known as the Metropolitan Board of Works is dispatched to find the cause. They descend into the sewers, searching for the source of the stench, and when they find it, they do something remarkable. They acknowledge the problem and do their best to fix it. Bazalgette's engineers are summoned, and the great work begins. Slowly, surely, the sewers are cleared, and the river begins to flow again. When it's done, London is transformed. The cholera outbreaks decline, and the people can once again enjoy the river, though never quite cleanly. As for Harry and Ruth, they slip back into the shadows. They have nothing left to fight for, and nowhere left to go. The tunnels are less crowded now. The game is up. Now we want to hear your story. Where does the river take you? What adventures do you have there? And what do you bring back with you to the world above? Let us know in the comments below. The Great Stink forced a reckoning. It revealed how the unseen, the waste, the filth, the very workings of a city cannot be ignored forever. And sometimes change doesn't come with revolution or riots, but with a smell so bad, it clears a room. Thank you for watching. To keep these videos free, please consider making a donation. And if you would like to receive updates whenever we release new content, sign up to our newsletter. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this house. I am your host. Please do try to ignore the grime clinging to the windows. It is an oversight we simply do not have time to address today. Oh, come in, come in. Do not let the weather bother you. Take these coats, shawls, and gloves. You will find hooks by the door. Thank you. Yes, I will send for a maid to take your cloak. Now, may I offer you some refreshment? Tea? Is that not terribly pedestrian? Perhaps a spot of sherry, then. Or maybe a glass of wine. No, no, no. Mrs. Overall has just arrived with fresh lemonade. How splendid. I do so love that woman. Always thinking of our needs. Come, come. Do sit down. Rest those weary bones. You look absolutely famished. Have some cake. Yes, all this will be cleared away soon. We have an engagement at 4:89. Time does slip away, does it not? I say, we must have been sitting here for nearly 10 minutes, and I haven't even introduced you to my daughter. Clara, my dear, why don't you come and join us? Say hello. Are you sketching again? Oh, yes. She spends most of her days locked away in her room with nothing but her pencils and her pads of watercolor paper. She yearns to be an artist, you know. But a girl cannot earn a living with such frivolous pursuits. Not in our station. It is not done. Hence, she will marry well. I have already found a suitable match for her. Alfred will be joining us for dinner this evening. He is the son of Baron von Schmaltz. Yes, he's terribly dull, but rich. Rich, rich, rich. Clara, come and show Miss Elphinston your latest work. Yes, Miss Elphinston is staying with us for a few days. She is, how shall I put this delicately, terminally unwed. There are certain advantages to a grand house, you see, like a steady stream of eligible young ladies looking for a husband. But now, my dears, it is time for me to start my toilette. Oh, I say, Clara, would you mind fetching my lavender-scented soap? It's in the basin by the side of the bath, you know, the one with the chipped enamel. I say, don't buy new things unless they are absolutely necessary. These soaps last such a long time, and one must use every bit of it up. Waste not, want not. I told you this engagement starts at 8:30. 8:30. Oh, yes. Well then, Miss Elphinston, I must hurry along. Do try not to touch anything. And please do not be alarmed by the portraits staring at you from the walls. They mean you no harm. Good day. Good day. Now then, did you hear that, Clara? She means us no harm. She is quite harmless, really. Just a bit of a gossip. You know, people like to talk about the cracks in the facade, don't they? Such a pity. All this striving, all this pretending, and for what? Another dreary ball, another season of endless parties and empty smiles. Oh, to be young and beautiful and trapped inside a gilded cage? Yes, it is a sorry state of affairs. A sorry state of affairs indeed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, if you will follow me, I will show you the drawing room. No, no, not that way. This way, please. Come in, come in. Do not be afraid. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see. Here. Just a little girl painting her world. One stroke at a time. Nothing to see here. Ha ha. Oh, Miss Elphinston, why are you hiding? Come out, wherever you are. You can't hide from me forever. I see your brush strokes, little girl. I see your colors, hear your whispered words. Soon, very soon, you will show me what you've made. I can't wait to see your masterpiece. Now let's turn to the women of the house. Corsets, stays, petticoats, dresses with countless buttons and boning. Getting dressed might take an hour, with the help of a maid. A woman of status never dressed herself. Her waist must be narrow, her posture straight, and above all, her demeanor must be gentle, modest, and agreeable. But beneath the silk and lace, many women chafed. Opportunities were limited. Expectations were crushing. Reading too much, speaking too boldly, or showing too much enthusiasm for ideas outside the domestic sphere could raise eyebrows. The ideal woman was graceful, quiet, devoted, and above all, useful to her husband's reputation. Some rebelled quietly, through literature, through painting, through letters written late at night by candlelight. Others endured silently. The soft tyranny of the drawing room was no less real than the harshness of the factory, only better hidden. And for the men, the pressure came in different forms. An upper-class Victorian gentleman was expected to project dignity and restraint. He might manage an estate, pursue politics, or simply live off inherited wealth. But even so, his days were governed by ritual, morning papers, hunting parties, meetings, club visits, and social obligations. Emotions, especially vulnerability, were not welcome. Stoicism was everything. Children, too, were shaped early. Raised by nannies, instructed by tutors, and drilled in manners before affection. They were not to speak at the table unless addressed. They learned Latin before they learned laughter. And when they misbehaved, discipline came quietly, but firmly. At night, the estate is calm. Oil lamps glow behind embroidered curtains. The soft ticking of clocks fills the halls. And yet, behind each closed door, a life presses gently against the constraints of propriety, aching for breath, for meaning, for the freedom to be more than a role in a carefully staged play. So here we are, in the quiet of privilege. And still, there is struggle, not for food or firewood, but for authenticity, for choice, for something as simple as saying what one truly feels. Today, we're visiting the city of Bath in England. In your headphones, you're hearing the clip-clop of horse hooves on stone, the rumble of carriages, the murmur of well-to-do Victorians out for their day. Imagine yourself strolling down a street, lined with grand Georgian architecture. It's a perfect summer's day, warm but not too hot. You pass by neat rows of shops with inviting window displays. The air carries the scent of fresh bread and pipe tobacco. There are ladies in fine dresses, gentlemen in their finest suits. All around you are signs of prosperity. But just beyond this tidy facade, what is happening? What secrets does this seemingly idyllic scene conceal? Welcome to the series, where the past is never dead. It's all around us. And now we invite you to step into this immersive world. Take a moment to look around. Feel free to pick up objects, to open drawers, to get a closer sense of what it might have been like to live during the height of the Victorian age. As you explore, you'll hear recordings of period music and sound effects. You may also encounter some costumed interpreters who will bring this world to life before your eyes. In this inaugural exhibition, we have brought together objects from museums and private collections to evoke the atmosphere of an upper middle class home in Victorian England. Wander through the rooms, experience the rituals of the time, and along the way, discover what life was really like during this pivotal era. From the glittering chandeliers to the humble chamber pots, each object tells a story. Some are grand, some are amusing, some both fascinating and grotesque. Taken together, they form a rich tapestry that captures the essence of a bygone age. As you make your way through the house, you'll come across a cast of characters, each meticulously crafted to reflect the nuances of Victorian society. Meet the servants. Overhear snippets of conversation between the family members. Listen closely, and you'll learn not only about the past, but also about human nature itself. The exhibition is designed to transport you back in time, to make you feel as though you've stepped into another world. Yet it's also filled with surprises. You never quite know what you might discover around the next corner. So come, immerse yourself in the sights, sounds, and stories of a Victorian house. Allow yourself to be transported to a time when gaslight flickered on the fog-laden streets, and the Industrial Revolution was reshaping the very fabric of society. Who knows? You might just find that the past is never as distant as we think. Now then, we're at an end, or maybe just beginning, depending on how you count the hours and where you start your day. I don't rightly know which street this is, but I do know we're somewhere near Whitechapel. Not that it matters much, because the fog has swallowed up the names of all the streets tonight. It's one of those thick, clinging mists that seeps into your clothes and clings to your bones. You feel it more than see it, a dampness around you that chills right through the warmest coat. And now, dear listener, the gas lamps have dimmed. The streets of Victorian London fade slowly into the mist, their echoes quieter now, their secrets tucked safely back beneath brick and bone. We began our walk in the cramped, sooty corners of a slum, where childhood was a daily trial and comfort a luxury few could name. I don't want to linger here, not on this side of the fog and the glass, but it's worth remembering the chill of those forgotten places, how the very stones seem to suck the warmth from your skin. We walked past factory bells and matchstick fumes, and coughs that never stopped, the coughs that rattled the ribs like dice in a tin box. It wasn't a place for children, and yet they were everywhere, little faces peering out from doorways, their eyes catching the lamplight for a brief, bright moment before it was snuffed out again. I wonder if they dreamt of brighter things, of houses with windows that shone and chimneys that puffed out happy breaths of steam. I wonder if they knew such places existed. Did their dreams stretch that far? Then we followed the shadow of a killer, or maybe just a man hurrying home, his face hidden in the folds of his coat. I hesitate to say his face was lost, for that implies a choice, a deliberate turning away. And who are we to judge the motives of a man in the shadows? Not to sensationalize, but to remember how fear can shape a neighborhood, and how absence sometimes lingers longer than action. Do you hear me? Absence, like the gaslights we passed, can flicker and fade, but it never truly goes out. It just burns on in the darkest corners of the mind. From there, we descended into the bowels of the city, down into tunnels that smelled of stale waste and hope, where the river ran black and the only light came from the gleam of a pickaxe, or the flicker of a lantern held by a man whose face was lined with the labors of a lifetime. There are some places that should stay buried, some things best left undisturbed. It's easy enough to say, unearth the dirt and scrub out the grime, but what about the dirt and grime within? What about the sights that no amount of fresh air and sunlight can cleanse? Those things, too, must be carried. Somewhere, somehow. For better or worse, the world keeps turning. The wheel keeps turning, grinding out its rhythm day and night. And the river keeps flowing, taking the good and the bad further out to sea. We climbed at last to the top of the hill, leaving the darkness and the stink behind. Before us lay a vista of gaslight and shining window panes, of carriages that rattled by on cobblestones, of men and women whose faces were lit by the glow of 1,000 oil lamps. It's a long way down from the heights of luxury to the depths of despair. And what's more, it's a long way up. Some started their lives on the highest floors and never knew of the chill downstairs. Others began in the dark and dreamed of nothing more than a corner to call their own, a place with a window to let in the light and the sound of voices that cared. Few knew it better than Polly, who started out in a room like this, all polish and finery, and ended up in the gloom of a basement where the only sounds were the drip of a leaking pipe and the sigh of the wind through a broken pane. She knew, as we all do in the end, that comfort is a habit of the heart as much as a circumstance of life. It's something you make and carry with you. It's not bought or sold on the open market. It is earned in the quiet moments when the world is still and your only company is the ghost of yourself from a while back. Comfort, like courage, is earned in the making. So we walked on, two figures swallowed by the fog, passing the gas lamps that sputtered inside. The sooty air hung heavy with the smells of 1,000 fires, 1,000 hopes, 1,000 heartaches. And all the while, the rhythm of the city went on, the rumble of carts, the chatter of crowds, the clink of glasses in some far-off tavern. It's a lullaby of the lost and the lonely, a requiem for those who never made it out, and a carol for those who did. In the end, the only sounds that reach us are the ones we carry inside. So listen closely, traveler, for the past still speaks if you know where to look and how to listen. The soot has settled. The bells no longer ring, but the rhythm remains slow, steady, and softly fading into silence. Sleep well. The past will keep.